The Lone Star Arts District is just a few blocks from Blue Star and has been developing in recent years as a space where San Antonio's local artists can gather and create. It's also the space of Brandon Nepote's studio. His exhibition Tipping Point opens at Blue Star on April 3rd. Come with us as we walk through his studio.
My name is Brandon Nepote. Welcome to Grindstone Gallery and Studios, located in the downtown Lone Star Art District. This piece is titled Immortal Compulsion. An idea of wanting to live as long as you can, take advantage of as much life as you can. So, being a child, a product of the 80s, grew up playing Nintendo, always loved Mario Brothers. So the piece of red western cedar, I sort of mimic or imitate the idea of that one life wing you can find while playing the game. Extend your playing time. And I wanted to add an element that seems impossible to sort of just be balancing on top of it. Very direct of where it's wanting to go. That's why I painted the arrow red. You know, you always want to go forward, you don't want to go backwards.
So a lot of the pieces that are around us and the pieces that are in the show at Blue Star, they have a playful quality, whether because it's a direct reference to a cartoon or the color, or even the shapes of the branches really read as playful or whimsical or cartoony. Can you talk about that, your interest in that type of visual language?
I believe that's just myself sort of interpreting those conversations that way. Mm-hmm. I'm a playful person. I like to have a lot of fun. I don't take myself that serious. So it would seem like, regardless if the conversation was an argument or was talking about politics where people were really upset about with each other, I still think it would still come out as playful, because it's just the interpretation. It's just sort of, I don't know, my own personality sort of being interpreting it that way, I guess. This piece right here is called Single Transceiver. It's probably the oldest piece in the show, Tipping Point. It's made out of steel and wood, red western cedar. I believe this is a branch off of a blackjack tree. This is a steel sphere to counterbalance the weight. A lot of people think it's always going to be falling over. I fill it up with sand just so I can get the weight back over here so it stands up. The table I constructed, single transceiver, is a term in aeronautical aviation. You'll see a lot of this repeated stacked laminated plywood piece. It's something that I came up with in graduate school. I really like the technique, the look it gets. I get the end grain on all the wood around the whole entire piece. I know I don't really manipulate the branches other than debarking them. Well, this piece is called For the Ferryman. This ore has been in my family for a long time. My mom's side of my family, they were fishermen. I've always had it. I decided to use it as this idea of, you're up shit's creek, so to speak, when you start to pass on to the afterlife. So I would like to think that if the ferryman was taking me to the afterlife, that his paddle really wouldn't work. So that's why I hinged it, making the paddle like unusable. This branch coming out, this growth of this bright neon green, it's aspen. I picked it up when I was actually on my honeymoon with my wife, and ever since then I've been thinking about how to use it in work.
How does color come into play?
I believe I like to use the color as like an emotional sort of definition of a conversation. I might not have gone into color theory as well as I should have in graduate school, but I feel that certain topics do sort of carry on an emotion. So I like to use bright colors sort of to accentuate maybe the ends or the key points of conversations, and maybe the branches are more of a more subdued sort of yellows and greens. Mm-hmm. It seems to be a little bit more of this laid back sense, and then all the other objects that are going with the conversation, they seem to be the more colorful objects, sort of, you know, when people are starting to get excited in the conversation. So you'll see a lot of mark making on my branches, this sort of rough grooved look that I do after I paint the pieces, and I achieve that by using a wood rasp. Working on a piece or just little apparatuses of a future piece, I usually start with something real monotonous, something that I don't really enjoy doing, sort of a real blue collar way of thinking, you know. So I'll grab my rasp and I'll grab my branch, one that I think I'll be using in a future piece, and I'll just start rasping on it. And I'll just do that for hours. When you're doing something where you don't have to use your brain power, you know, to do said task, it opens up your mind to, you know, use all that brain power thinking about just the piece. So yeah, I usually just work on pieces like this, and when I'm done rasping this, I'll usually just set this branch aside and I'll pick something else up. You know, it's either that or I'll start adding just something that I've been working on, just real quick. Little tiny little sculptures, little studies possibly. Piece of red western cedar that I painted white. Put those wooden dowel balls in this, and this is going to be part of a sculpture. You know, I like that. I've done this a while ago, but I'll pick it up. I'll put the oil of my hands on it. Really make it look like it has a history. You know, maybe not a function, but a life of its own. Like it could tell you stories. So, you know, that'll be part of a sculpture. Another little element that I made, just got some wooden pallets from the metal shop across the way. Repurposed the wood. One more new element that could be on a piece. So as we've been walking through your studio and you've been talking about your works, you know, there's parts and pieces everywhere that can function in different sculptures, or the sculptures can be disassembled and reassembled as something else. Does that process reflect at all on the content, you know, a sentence being structural in the same way, you know, having parts of a sentence and those, you know, does that process reflect on that? Yes, I believe it directly influences the way I put pieces together. The interchangeable parts, having a conversation with somebody, it starts on one topic, but it can end on a completely different topic, changing each other's opinions on the subject of the conversation. Heck, the subject of the conversation can completely change from beginning to end. So yeah, I believe that it's a direct correlation between the objects I put together and then being able to disassemble and reassemble into new pieces. When I was young, my sister had leukemia, and when we were at the hospital visiting her, she got to use these really cool things to brush her teeth with. They're called toothettes, And I was always jealous because the toothette is used for people that have weak immune systems, so it's a one-time use, so they don't put germs in their mouth from a toothbrush that they've used every day. And I was like always jealous of using that. So here recently I've started to investigate that shape of the toothette. More plywood, painted a whole bunch of times, sand it back out, paint it again, sand it back out. I'll keep doing that, especially if I'm stuck in the studio, if I don't know anything else to do. Start painting on this, sand it back out, until I achieve that. And one day it'll just coalesce and become something that I want to use. Like thrift stores and swap meets, and I'll buy old woodworking tools, because I like to think of myself as a craftsman. So I like to try to keep things as unelectrical as possible. I like to use my own hands. Wood and rasp. When I sand on things, I usually just use a wood block, piece of sandpaper. It's not until I really have to use an electric orbital sander or an electric hand planer, that's when my hand's forced to do that. Like something that is a perfect example is this piece right here. It's a piece that I've been working on. It's going to an outdoor exhibition in Wichita Falls, Texas, the Kemp Center for the Arts. I was invited by a fellow member of the Texas Sculpture Group, a organization I belong to, local Texas artists. Kurt Durhog invited me to be in the show, and he challenged me because he told me in January, and I think I got the paperwork for the show January 27th, and the piece had to be done by February 10th. So I said challenge accepted, and that's so I had to use a lot of power tools. I welded all of this up myself. This is the plywood technique I've always been telling you about, but it's solid. It's actually 3 pieces of 3/4 inch birch plywood, stack laminated, and to achieve the cylinder, I used an electric hand planer, planed it down, and then I put just some Thompson water sealer, because this is really the first outdoor piece I've ever made. I've always considered myself an indoor sculptor. Never really gave it thought about making work that could sort of withstand the elements. So, we'll see if it works or not. You can see these holes that I've drilled. That's where I'm still putting these spheres in there, and they'll be painted the same color of this sphere. The idea of the conversation taking shape, having growth.